Today's world is facing big challenges. Using technology to make our communities smarter, safer, more efficient, equitable, and sustainable is no easy task. And for the pioneering visionaries that have taken on this challenge, we salute you. Welcome to Conversations with Smart City Pioneers, where we sit down with the best and brightest minds from around the globe, sharing how they're leading the smart city digital transformation revolution.
Hi, Matthew. Welcome to Conversations with Smart City Pioneers. It's so great to have you on the show.
Thanks, Herb. Glad to be here.
Great. Well, for the audience that is watching this, my name is Herb C. I'm the host of Conversations with Smart City Pioneers. And with me today is Matthew Seeds. He's the Director of Innovation Systems for the County of St. Charles, Missouri. And just so you can put St. Charles, Missouri on the map, the county is across the river from the city of St. Louis, just lying to the west of it. And Matthew, as best as I can tell, the county is growing like a weed. You're a little over 400,000 in population today. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's one of the fastest growing counties in Missouri. We're the third largest, and it's really been a joy to grow up here in St. Charles and see it grow over the years.
My goodness. Well, I was going to say, I grew up in St. Louis for a lot of my formative years. And I remember St. Charles being a little bit of a sleepy community, and the city is a little bit different than the county. Just for the viewer real quick at home, tell us a little bit about the difference between the county and the city. What does the county encapsulate versus the city? And then we'll kind of unpack a little bit about your experience, and then we'll get into some of the questions.
Yeah, definitely. So St. Charles County is incorporated with about 8 major cities, if you will. Those include like Wentzville, O'Fallon, which is one of the largest municipalities in the state of Missouri. We also have St. Charles City and St. Peters, to name a few. So there's a lot of municipalities that are located within the county that provide their own services to those residents. But then there's also the county, which incorporates the unincorporated portions of the residents. And so we've got our own police. We've got a lot of different things that we handle from the county level to those residents. One thing also that we do is collect the taxes for all of the municipalities and all the political subdivisions. So there's a lot of things that the county handles outside of those cities that handle different things as well.
Well, very good. And if memory serves me, you also have one of the major interstates, Highway 70, cuts right through the county, and that's a major thoroughfare for a lot of commerce that's traveling east and west. And I mean, there's a lot of different components that you've got to think about in terms of all the different moving parts to make sure the county runs properly. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. We also have essentially the crossroads, they call it. Wentzville is the crossroads of America, I like to think, and so that's when 40, 61 highway and 70 intersect. So there's a couple of different ways to get to St. Charles County. There's a lot of different transportation methods, which is a big thing that we've been working on. I'm sure we're going to talk about here in a little bit. So yeah, it's also an interesting county in that it's so wide. You can go 25 miles and still be in St. Charles County from east to west, essentially. And then it's got a pretty good north-south boundary as well. So it's a pretty large county. It's got a lot of different things from farming, to the cities, to the populated areas. There's just a lot of things that happen in St. Charles, and it's a great place to live.
Well, that's a great setup. Tell us a little bit about your background. I know that you've been doing great work in and around the county and the city for a number of years. Tell us a little bit about how you got to where you're at, the roles that you've played and some of the things that have kind of led you to, before we get into some of the projects that you've done.
Sure. So kind of right outside of college, I went to work in the Senate and the House of Representatives down in Jeff City. But I've grown up in St. Charles, and went to Jeff City, work in the Capitol, which was a lot of fun. Came back home and started working for the city of St. Charles, and moved quickly there to the director of IT for the city. Was there for about 7 years doing that role, and then jumped across the street. It was a long trip. Because right across the street, the city of St. Charles is the county seat for St. Charles County. So right across the street was the county of St. Charles, and so moved over here about 3 years ago, a little over 3 years ago now, and I'm the director of information systems for St. Charles County now.
Great. Thank you for that background. So in looking at the two jobs, because obviously 7 years with the city, and then obviously you've been with the county now for a while too, tell us a little bit about some of the projects, because one of the things that I think is always interesting is to understand that whether you're in a city or a small town to move down or a county maybe to move up, there's some similarities and also some perhaps key differences, but the projects all have a unique, I guess, flavor to them. And I know that you've done some really interesting projects. So tell us about some of the different projects, particularly if you think about some of the more advanced technologies. Technology is a great tool, but really it's about the impact of, what it can do for people and the cities that are providing the services to them.
Yeah, absolutely. Working for the city of St. Charles, we obviously had a couple of different things that we provided residents that maybe the county doesn't, for instance, like water service. And so utilizing wireless meters for your water service, and just how much that impacts kind of the employees, but also impacts the residents. So as an employee, instead of having to go out and read those water meters at every single one as you're walking through a neighborhood, now you've transformed that to, okay, I can just drive a vehicle down the street, pick up all these water reads, and I can do way more than I was doing as I was walking through the neighborhood. Not only that, if a resident has a leak on their water meter or on their, the resident side of the kind of the demarc, then they'll know sooner that there's a problem because we're able to read the water meters more frequently. So I think, as we move forward in technology, just for something like that, that's a huge benefit to the resident. So they don't get their water bill 3 months later and say, what happened? I didn't see this, foresee this happening at all. What's going on? And then figuring out if there was a leak on their side. And also from us, we're able to, quickly get through the city, maybe do more passes quickly so that the bills aren't so spaced out for 3 months. You're able to kind of work through that process a little bit more quickly. And that's a difference that the county doesn't have over the city. The county doesn't have a water service that they provide. That's more handled by the municipalities. And I would say that, another couple other things are you're more in tune with economic development at the local level. You've got a little bit more levers to pull with, in terms of economic development and things that you can do to bring businesses in. And, one thing that you're focusing on is, how can we provide a innovative space or show that, we want to bring in new innovation of businesses to our area, and how can we kind of set up the infrastructure for that for them is one thing that we were, focused on when I was at the city. I'll say the last thing that we worked on heavily was a partnership between the school district of the City of St. Charles School District and the City of St. Charles, working together with, how can we leverage infrastructure like fiber in the ground to be able to provide services to those schools that they didn't have to, lease those, lines through an ISP, or how could we lower costs to the taxpayers by kind of sharing or, cooperating together and utilizing some fiber that's already in the ground and maybe building some stuff out and working together as a team. So, the city enhanced its fiber infrastructure while I was there by about 30 to 40 miles worth of fiber. And that kind of built kind of this big underlying infrastructure where we could then start to figure out what are the new exciting things that we can do now that we have this fiber throughout the area. So those are some things that we worked on at the city level. And the county level, we're kind of doing some similar things, kind of focusing on that transportation we talked about, and interconnecting all of our traffic signals together, which is, I know a lot of people think, who cares if the traffic signals are integrated, and who cares if they're communicating with each other? Well, it's a big deal when you have an accident on I-70. And we know that everybody's going to get off of the highway or the interstate to take the service roads because they want to get past the accident. And so we've synced up all of those traffic signals so that we know, okay, there's going to be a heavy utilization of the service roads. Let's go ahead and make all these traffic signals green. Let's get people moving parallel to the interstate and then get them back on the interstate. So we're seeing less travel times. We're seeing, quicker, the ability for people to move quicker through the county, which I think is a huge asset, because a lot of individuals who live in the county, they work in St. Louis County or they work down in St. Louis City.
Mhm.
And so there's a lot of people moving through that I-70 corridor through St. Charles County, both in the morning and in the evening. So we want to get them either to work quickly or to home quickly as well. So those are some things, kind of just highlights that we're working on or have worked on in the past that I think are really good to highlight.
You know, that's interesting on the traffic signal side. Nobody likes to sit in traffic. I've yet to hear anyone. Let me know if you've heard of somebody who says, "Gosh, I really wish I had more time in my car." Start, stop, start. Start, stop at 5 miles per hour. I haven't heard that one yet. But what I do know is that mobility is such an important lifeblood of the community. The productivity that you can have and the quality of life. I know that some folks that I've worked with coming out of California, they don't miss the traffic jams. And obviously the traffic jam on 70 is probably a far cry from what LA has, but still traffic is traffic. One of the things that's interesting to me is if you think about this, to the degree that you've got traffic signals that you've now synchronized, and it sounds great to be able to have, green lights. I've got to guess that is heavily reliant upon fiber and connectivity and wireless, all of that. So tell me a little bit about the equation. What do you do next? Well, once you've got traffic signals synchronized, what other things can you do in addition to help the traffic? And does the fiber support it, or what's kind of the connectivity picture look like? Because you guys are growing so fast. How do you keep up with that?
Yeah, it's definitely so. So we've spent quite a number of years through a number of different phases of building fiber throughout the county to I think it's 144 traffic signals throughout the county. So yeah, it's been a process, right, to get that fiber into the ground. But once you get that infrastructure in the ground, well, now you've opened yourself up to a lot of different opportunities that are out there. And there may be some opportunities that we don't know of yet, right? As technology continues to advance, there may be things that come up that will, continue to go, okay, yeah, that's something that we should look at. There was a big push for 5G. It was kind of like, okay, well, that's great. Now we have, masts in the ground that could handle a 5G antenna potentially with a fiber backbone to it. We've got 144 of those around the county. Is that something that we could use, that infrastructure for potentially? We've got a lot of, automated or autonomous vehicle stuff coming up, especially with Tesla and what they're doing. And I know there's some other companies that are out there that are testing things out in Las Vegas and different cities as well. We want to be able to say, there's a potential usage with these traffic signals and connecting with vehicles that maybe, comes into the future. And one thing that we're working on currently is our kind of enhanced preemption for our emergency vehicles. And so we're able to use a newer system, not the old, a signal that was kind of in the vehicle that would point when it got close to the traffic signal and say, hey, there's an emergency vehicle coming. We're able to use GIS now and GPS and kind of say, okay, we know the directions that they're going to be going because we got our CAD system from our police and fire. We've got that system integrated with this network that it can say, okay, we know that we're going to be reaching this light at some point. Let's go ahead and turn the light now because we know where the vehicle is. We know it's upcoming. Let's get all that traffic moving so that by the time that the vehicle gets there, there's not a traffic jam at that light and people figuring out, what do I do? They're sitting at a red light going, what do I do? There's sirens behind me. Do I move into the intersection? Just kind of prepare that way. And we're seeing lower travel times for our emergency vehicles to scenes, which is a huge increase in, potentially life-saving stuff. But also, it's also helps with fire insurance and some other insurance options for residents. If you have small or lower travel times for your emergency response, that actually is helpful to you as a resident. And so there's things out there like that we're continuing to look at. And I think there's going to be more options and more technology as it continues to advance that we will be able to potentially, utilize because we've got this infrastructure in place. And I think that's the biggest thing is get the infrastructure in place because you don't know what you don't know yet. And as technology continues to advance, you're going to potentially be able to utilize that for other things. And so that's the biggest takeaway that I think that we've had from the county level, at least, is, yeah, we spent some money. And we utilized different grant opportunities to do so, which was always very helpful from the federal government and state government as well. That's been very helpful to get that infrastructure in the ground. Now, how do we leverage that in the future is going to be a question that I think we're going to have to, look at and see what's out there and then continue to move forward.
You raise another really good point. That infrastructure, you said, really sets up and provides the opportunity to have opportunities to be able to address things you don't even know when you don't know. I've got to think that infrastructure really came to the forefront during COVID. When people had to virtualize overnight, all of a sudden Zoom seems like it's more normal because after 20 or 30 or 50 Zoom meetings, everyone's used to it, but you're not only on Zoom for business or, for government, but you're competing for Zoom for kids. The kids are on there as well. Were there some lessons that came out of the COVID era besides the recognition that infrastructure is more important than ever? Because again, I know in my household, I was fighting for bandwidth and I wish I had every, bit and byte that I could get. Otherwise it was a little choppy some days. But what other lessons maybe did you take away from COVID that the county, said, gosh, observationally, here's some things we didn't really think about this, but are there any things that kind of come to mind?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for us was how do we provide our services to the residents without having them have to come down to the administration building. So a lot of our stuff was focused on how do we get this online? How do we get this so that folks can do the business that they need to do at the county without having to come down here physically, stand in line and pay a bill or whatever they need to do, apply for a license, apply for a marriage license, get a building permit set up, a lot of different functions that we wanted to kind of clear the queue, if you will. We didn't want to have all these folks standing in the lobby on something that is easy enough that they could do online. And so I think the biggest shift for us was understanding, how do we provide those services and move stuff online for them, which was, I think, a big benefit. But I also think kind of, teeing off on what you said was a lot of the kids, are at school, they've got tablets, or they've got a laptop now to do their homework with, and not everybody has an internet service at their home. And so I think that's one thing that I think we focused on a little bit too, is how do we utilize the infrastructure that you have, or way we have to say, okay, let's maybe set up some areas where we can provide Wi-Fi for individuals, or how do we provide a higher speed connectivity to areas that are underserved in the county, which I think is a big push right now with the infrastructure bill that went through the Congress recently. So that's actually, I think a very important item is getting that access to the internet. I mean, I think all of us, we're so used to having it when we're in a populated area. You don't think about the individuals who don't live in populated areas or a little bit underserved in the community, that they may not have high-speed access to what we think is just normal day life. And they're struggling to, have connectivity, and kind of reminds you of the 90s, right? Growing up, going, boy, I can't believe we were able to function with dial-up internet. And so I think there's a lot of things that we've kind of learned that we need to be providing services to everyone. How do we provide those services, and how do we get everybody connected? I think are the two biggest things that probably we focused on pretty heavily during the COVID pandemic.
That makes a lot of sense. So I heard you say that you want to get rid of the queue. If somebody doesn't have to drive across the street or across town, or even worse, cross town, and there's congestion on Highway 70 or wherever they may be coming from, was there also the reduction of the workflow process backstage, from the employee side? Because again, I'm suspecting that they had to stay home too, and there were a number of things to be able to make the front stage line go away. You had to do a lot of things backstage too. Tell me a little bit about what that looks like.
Yeah, so I mean, we definitely were able to. I think everybody took a deep dive of their staff and kind of looked and said, okay, what positions are available to work remotely, and which ones are, the front office. They kind of interact with the public on a daily basis. Those individuals aren't going to be able to work remotely. And so it's kind of figuring out that little, balance of, how do you handle your services remotely and how do you handle them in person, kind of a hybrid format. But then that kind of all comes back to IT. So it came back to us to figure out, how do we handle hundreds of employees, all logging into the system, all trying to work remotely. While we've got folks here on site, we want to keep that up and running as well, quickly. So there was definitely some looks internally. And I think what happened was, as we had individuals, and what the pandemic really did for us as well, there's a lot of individuals who were thinking about retiring, or kind of on that cusp of, I'm not really sure, maybe I'm going too soon. The pandemic pretty much set them like, I'm going to retire. And so they retired out, and then it gave the county an opportunity to say, okay, well, do we need that position? Because we kind of moved stuff remotely. We're able to do more things now with the technology that we have. Do we really need that full-time position? And what I will say is, there's always a lot of focus on how do we, lower the overall headcount in government, which is understandable because of technology and advancements. But what tends to happen is those technology advancements require IT support. So what we're really doing is we're shifting those full-time employees that from that department, from that front office kind of area, more to the IT support to be able to support the new applications, to support the infrastructure and the operations, and to kind of support the overall architecture and how do we innovate, continue to innovate. So really there's more of a shift than a reduction of staff or anything like that, but it's more of a shift towards that IT of, well, now we got to support this and we really have to make it work. And so that's kind of what I've seen both at the city and at the county is that shift of movement from a department more to that support.
That makes sense. It was interesting. I think at one point in time, IT was thought to be a little bit of a department, and you guys kind of touched certain things. But now I don't know of any business unit that doesn't have IT. IT is prevalent throughout the entire enterprise. Some a little bit more prominent than others. But there's nothing that doesn't touch technology these days. And so taking that approach to this next question, a lot of times when people are thinking about smart cities and digital transformation, smart cities have now been put into the blender, they're getting a little bit confused, but really digital transformation to me is the natural evolution that you've got to go through to be able to modernize things. And then smart city seems to be a little bit more bent in certain areas. So when I hear you say something like autonomous vehicles and they're coming, and I read a statistic here recently that 6% of the US market is now trying to buy autonomous vehicles, but the supply chain can't keep up. Tell me a little bit about what your view is for AV and the county, because I know it's got to be infrastructure, it's got to be charging stations, it's got to be data, traffic signals, everything that you've touched on. There's got to be a lot of moving parts. What does that recipe look like? You've got to be able to be thinking about to be able to anticipate autonomous vehicles when they hit the county en masse.
Yeah, I mean, fortunately for us, or unfortunately, it just kind of depends on how you look at it, is, when you work for a governmental organization and you kind of have to know everything. Usually when you're in the, private sector, you can be a little bit more, segmented and have focus in one area. When you're working in government, you kind of have to know a little bit of everything, because there isn't this, okay, this team is going to be working on specifically this item, and kind of, so you're constantly looking up information. You're constantly working with individuals and with consultants, et cetera, to figure out what's out there, because I have to know what's out there for when I'm setting up my future budget. What am I looking for? So there's a lot of kind of partnerships, in the private-public partnership arena, where, how do we set up for success for the future that we really don't know what the future is? I think everybody understands, or hope everybody understands, that fiber is not going to go anywhere. It's going to be around for a while, and you can't go wrong with installing that. And so what we've done is, we work on highways, we work on roads. We're constantly resurfacing areas or putting in new roads throughout the county. We have a segment now where anytime that we're messing with a road, we are going to put conduit in for future potential fiber, installation. We may not need to put the fiber in now, but as long as we've got conduit in the ground, and as we continue to mess with these roads and continue to, construct these roads, we're going to have a really good network throughout the entire area where there's a road. And it's almost like a water line. really that people need to be thinking about is that this is such an essential service now that we should be focused on. That is the core of things we need to be installing when we're putting in a roadway. It's a standard utility that we should be focusing on, because that is going to kind of be the launch point of a lot of the different things. So you mentioned about autonomous vehicles. I mean, St. Charles County is a relatively fluent community all throughout the county, and so there's a lot of AVs around, or a lot of electric vehicles. Which you mentioned, charging stations. When I was with the city of St. Charles, we were working with a couple of companies to figure out, okay, where would be a really nice kind of a good area for a charging station area, or because there's not a lot of them around in our area at least, and they've got to be close to the interstate. They've got to be close to kind of the major traffic ways. So there's a lot of really interesting things of how do we bring those in, and then how do we work with companies who are focused on that that space. How do we bring them in to kind of work with them? Because we want to reach out, we want to be innovative. I like to be on the kind of the bleeding edge of technology and like to really promote that in the community. So I think there's a lot of things that we're focusing on. There's a lot of things that we're looking at. There's also a lot of things we don't know about. Mm-hmm. And so it's continually kind of keeping your eye out peeled, working with others, working with people that are in that space of, the new innovation, new technologies that are out there, just to start that discussion of, okay, well, what do we need to potentially be looking at? One project that we're working on right now is smart parking, which is a thing we're doing in downtown St. Charles. It's kind of a pilot project. There's about 1,200 spaces. It's a huge downtown area in St. Charles City. It's got a historic Main Street. Lewis and Clark left St. Charles on their journey west. So on the pathway to discovery. So that is kind of an important thing. There's a lot of people that come down to St. Charles for a lot of different events, a lot of different things. So anything that we can do to kind of be a little bit more innovative of, hey, is there a parking spot available? I want to go down and eat lunch on Main Street. Is there anything available? And stop kind of having individuals continually circling through the downtown area, creating traffic congestion. We got pedestrians all over. But there's a lot of things that kind of I get excited about because they're new and they're new to the area, more importantly. And so I think it's like I want to be that community that people would say, St. Charles, they're really focused on how we provide services more efficiently, more effectively, and also potentially a cost saving to the taxpayers. So there's a lot of things out there. So it's kind of a long, kind of winding question or answer to your question, but there's a lot of things out there that we're focused on, we're looking at, and continuing to kind of understand what's out there.
Well, based on that, seeing it saves money, it's more effective in this case way to be able to find a parking space faster. It's also very efficient. To be able to, get in and out, presumably from parking space or parking garage, or get faster out of your car into that bar or restaurant or retailer or wherever it is that you may be going. So all the hallmarks of good technology, it's invisible, it just seems to work, and people don't know why they're happy, but they are. So that's good. Let's talk a little bit about sometimes the unhappy side. You as a smart city pioneer, projects can go, really well, and sometimes they go less than well. I'm not suggesting anything has gone poorly ever under watch, but if there are any lessons learned that you could show somebody who's, taking on a project, it can seem very intimidating, especially for those communities that are smaller. Digital transformation forced them to be able to jump into the game, but now that they're especially getting money from the federal government, if they apply for some of these grants, they are forced to be able to do something with those monies. And obviously, it's a great opportunity to be able to fix things, but it can be scary. Are there any lessons learned that you haven't shared yet? And how to think about smart cities or digital transformation or technology in general with your, frankly, an urban planning mentality on top of technology?
Yeah, I think one project that didn't go fantastic was a project that we tried to do some smart lighting down in the historic St. Charles Main Street area. And this is when I was with the city of St. Charles. So we had seen a number of individuals coming from kind of all different communities coming down to St. Charles. There's some bars down on Main Street. So, come have fun in St. Charles. And then things started to kind of get a little bit out of hand. And so it's like, okay, well, we need to maybe focus on getting some cameras and getting some lighting in that area to make people, one, feel a little bit safer, and two, be able to crack down on any crimes that are being committed. We kind of have an idea of, okay, what car was it, and kind of how do we move forward with, investigating those situations. And I think the biggest thing was we're so excited to move forward with, lighting and cameras, no problem. We just need to kind of get some connectivity down there, and we got the electric down there, no problem. But the problem was the electric we had down there was the wrong voltage. We required major transformers on the poles. The aesthetics of it didn't look great. So there were boxes on the light poles, and kind of folks going, what is going on down here? Like, what is happening? So that one had to kind of, we had to pivot pretty quickly on that when it changed some of the lighting that we were doing down there. We kind of realized that we wouldn't be able to accomplish everything that we wanted to do, and may need to kind of scale it back. So I think the biggest thing that I would say is a lesson learned is, even though, or to maybe temper your expectations, or if you're a little excited about the solution, just make sure you have all the requirements and the scope is really, easily defined, because when you get down there, there might be something that you just didn't think of. You think, oh, it's electric. I'm gonna have electric, easy. And then it changes into a little bit more of a ball of yarn, kind of, being unwound. And so we had to pivot there, and that one was a project that was, not the most desirable one in my portfolio, but at the end of the day, you take those lessons that you've learned and you can easily apply it in the next thing that you do. As long as you're growing from it and you're not making the same mistakes over, I think any kind of mistake or failure is anything is one that you can grow upon and learn, and kind of make it easier for the next projects that happen in your community.
That makes a lot of sense. I know that sometimes when you're carving up roads or changing out transformers, the citizens can become very frustrated fast. And certainly if you're really doing some of the best work, it's always out of sight, out of mind, but things just happen naturally. But sometimes people want to see progress, and when they see signs of lack of progress, I know they can be very frustrating. If you think about technology on a go-forward basis, where do you think all this goes? I mean, what are the areas that you're most excited about when you think about the prospects of making an impact with technology for the county, or just in humanity in general? Where is technology going to be most needed? Pretty wide open question, but you, with your technology point of view, always like to get an understanding of how do you view technology going forward to be able to do the smartest things that are most necessary right now?
Yeah, I think a number of people want to, move forward in the technology just to move forward in the technology. But I don't know that that's necessarily kind of the right mentality that one should have, because I think, it's got to serve a purpose. And so I think the biggest thing for us is, we're looking at how do we be, innovative, one, but how do we be innovative that supports a service that we're already providing the residents, or maybe we're adding a portion of a service that they don't really, think about. But in the end, we'll be like, oh yeah, okay, we just changed the one way we did this, and it's so much, better, easier for us. And that's the biggest thing coming from a government perspective, is that, we're looking at how do we, be cost effective with the taxpayers' dollars, number one. And we're not looking just to spend money over here. We're trying to figure out how do we spend money so that in the future, we're not spending so much of the money to be able to do the same things. And I think that's kind of where technology is probably going to go, is how I can be more cost efficient, or cost
money, reduce cost.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and so that's kind of the biggest thing for us, is just how do we continue to be more effective, be efficient, and then save taxpayer dollars.
Okay. Well, that sounds like spoken like a true visionary, CIO-minded type of person, being able to understand the impact of the technology in your, civil servant, serve the taxpayer and the citizen and the businesses mindset. So that I'm sure serves you very well. Is there any last question that I should have asked? Because again, the folks that are watching this, really important that they understand that technology is an imperfect science. As Matthew, as you said, as long as you're learning along the way, not repeating mistakes, that's really important. And obviously, we talked about the foundational layers of fiber, really important. We talked about some great projects the water, the lighting, one was good, one was less good. We'll call it that, if we can say that. Is there anything else that we should share with folks before we wrap up? Any last words?
Yeah, I don't think I have any other points to kind of talk about. I think we kind of wrapped everything up there in those questions that you had. I appreciate all of the help along the way that you've had, and yeah, I think technology is definitely an asset for all of us, and I think as it continues to advance, I'm really excited to see what transpires with where we're headed. I think it's a very exponential growth in technology advancement. And so I think we're going to be seeing a lot of things. And I like to kind of be on the forefront, as I mentioned, but also at the same time is be cautious too. You don't have to move forward with the technology just to move forward with the technology. Make sure it makes sense. I think that the biggest takeaway is, don't do something just to do something.
Well, that is, I think, a great way to wrap up. Don't do things just to do them. That makes a lot of sense. Well, with me again, we had today Matthew Seeds, who's again been on the front line of smart cities for a number of years. Thank you, Matthew. Again, your role with the County of St. Charles, Missouri. Good luck with the continued progress of taking care of the future needs today. And we appreciate your time, and we look forward to talking to you in the future. Again, join us in the next episode. We'll be coming up with more wit and wisdom from folks that are on the front lines of conversations with smart city pioneers. Thanks so much.